The engine of the M10 tank destroyer had been dead for 40 minutes. Staff Sergeant Robert Braun crouched behind the 3-inch gun, watching German armor materialize through the morning haze south of Le Dézert, France. The date was July 11th, 1944. His vehicle sat crippled in a shallow depression 200 yards from the village edge, transmission shattered by a direct hit that had also torn through his driver's left leg. Private First Class James Keller lay in the driver's compartment, tourniquet cinched tight above his knee, morphine working through his system, but consciousness refusing to leave. The assistant driver had died instantly when the same shell penetrated. 3 men remained combat effective in a crew that should have numbered 5, but the gun still worked. The ammunition rack still held 48 rounds, and through Braun's field glasses, he could count German tanks advancing across the hedgerow country toward the thin American line. 9 Panthers, maybe 10, hard to tell through the bockage. The 899th Tank Destroyer Battalion had arrived at Le Dézert 2 days earlier, attached to the 9th Infantry Division's 39th Regiment. Their mission was simple on paper: provide mobile anti-tank support during the American push south from the Normandy beachhead, stop German armor from breaking through, keep the infantry alive. Nobody mentioned that the Panzer Lehr Division would launch a counteroffensive with nearly full strength. Nobody said the Americans would be defending instead of attacking. Nobody explained that tank destroyer doctrine, speed, mobility, shoot and scoot, meant nothing when your vehicle couldn't move. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The 899th had formed at Fort Lewis, Washington in July 1940 as the 99th Infantry Battalion, anti-tank. The unit redesignated as a Tank Destroyer Battalion in December 1941, just after Pearl Harbor, when the Army realized that German blitzkrieg tactics required specialized anti-tank forces. The Tank Destroyer Command believed that massed enemy armor could only be stopped by equally mobile American guns, not static fortifications, not infantry with bazookas. Mobile, powerful, concentrated firepower that could race to threaten sectors and ambush enemy tanks before they broke through. The M10 Wolverine embodied this doctrine perfectly. Built on a modified Sherman chassis, it mounted a 3-inch M7 gun, capable of penetrating most German armor at combat ranges. The vehicle sacrificed protection for mobility. Armor ranged from 9.5 millimeters to 57 millimeters, thin compared to the Sherman's 76 millimeters of frontal plate. The turret had no roof. This kept weight down and gave the crew better visibility, but left them exposed to artillery airbursts, mortar fragments, and any enemy soldier with a grenade who got close enough. The 3-inch gun fired armor-piercing rounds at 2,800 feet per second. Effective range against enemy tanks was roughly 1,200 yards, though experienced crews could score kills at 1,800 if conditions allowed. The gun could traverse manually through 360 degrees, but slowly, 80 seconds for a complete rotation. In a close-range tank duel, 80 seconds meant death. The crew of 5 included a commander, gunner, loader, driver, and assistant driver, who also served as radio operator and bow machine gunner. Except M10s didn't have bow machine guns. The design deleted that feature to save weight. For close defense, the crew relied on a 50 caliber Browning M2 machine gun mounted on the turret and their personal weapons. Thompson submachine guns, M1 carbines, grenades. The 899th trained with M10s for 2 years before deploying overseas. They learned gunnery at the Tank Destroyer School at Camp Hood, Texas. They practiced rapid displacement drills, fire 3 rounds, relocate, fire again, before the enemy could return accurate fire. They studied German tank identification, Panzer Lehr, Panzer IV, Tiger, Panther, silhouettes, armor thickness, weak points. The glacis plate on a Panther was 100 millimeters thick and sloped at 55 degrees, effectively impenetrable to the 3-inch gun at any range beyond point blank. But The side armor was only 50 millimeters. The turret sides, 45. A flanking shot could kill. The battalion landed at Utah Beach on June 10, 1944, 4 days after D-Day. They moved inland immediately, attached to the 4th Infantry Division for the assault on Cherbourg. The fighting was brutal but manageable. German resistance in the Bocage country was fanatical, but the enemy tanks were mostly older models, Panzer IVs, a few Su-30 assault guns. The 3-inch gun handled them adequately. Then came Le Dézert. The village sat astride a critical road junction, 5 miles south of Carentan. Whoever controlled Le Dézert controlled movement between the American and British sectors. The 9th Infantry Division captured it on July 8th after hard fighting against elements of the 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich. The 120th Infantry Regiment took the village. The 39th Regiment moved through to continue the push south. Then intelligence reported German armor massing for a counterattack. The Panzer Lehr Division had been savaged during the initial defense against the invasion, but it remained a formidable force. Originally formed as a demonstration unit to showcase the Wehrmacht's best equipment and most experienced personnel, Panzer Lehr fielded some of the finest tank crews in the German army. Their Panthers were the WWII model, upgraded engine, improved transmission, thicker frontal armor than earlier variants. The Panther WWII weighed 45 tons. Powered by a Maybach HL 230P30 V12 gasoline engine producing 690 horsepower, it could reach 30 miles per hour on roads, 15 cross-country. The main gun was a 7.5 centimeter KWK 42L70, arguably the finest tank gun fielded by any army in World War II. Muzzle velocity of 3,600 feet per second. At 500 yards, it could penetrate 180 millimeters of armor sloped at 30 degrees. At 1,000 yards, 140 millimeters. The Sherman's frontal armor was 63.5 millimeters. The M10's was 57. One German gunner could kill 3, 4, 5 American vehicles before anyone returned. Effective fire. Panzer Lehr's plan was simple. Punch through the gap between the 9th Infantry Division and the 30th Infantry Division. Retake Le Dézert, threatened the American flank, forced them to pull back infantry from the southern advance to plug the breach. Buy time for German reinforcements to arrive from the south. The attack began at 2300 hours on July 10th. 2 companies of Panzer Grenadiers, mechanized infantry, mounted in armored half-tracks, probed the American lines northeast of Le Dézert. Artillery fire forced them back, but they'd achieved their objective. They'd identified where the Americans were thin. At 0300 on July 11th, the main assault commenced. Panther tanks from the 1st Battalion of Panzer Lehr Regiment 101 advanced through pre-dawn darkness toward the village. Behind them came more Panzer Grenadiers. The Germans wanted Le Dézert back before sunrise. The 899th Tank Destroyer Battalion's Company C had 3 platoons positioned around Le Désert's perimeter. 12 M10s total. They dug in the previous evening, using the TD's mobility to prepare firing positions that maximized cover while maintaining clear fields of fire toward likely German approach routes. Standard tank destroyer doctrine: find good ground, wait for the enemy to come to you, kill him before he sees you. The Germans didn't cooperate. Instead of advancing along the obvious routes, the roads, the open fields, the Panthers came through the bocage. The hedgerow country that gave Normandy its character also gave German armor perfect concealment. Ancient earthen berms, topped with dense brush and trees, divided every field into a separate compartment. Visibility was measured in yards, not hundreds of yards. A 75mm gun could fire through the hedgerows, but you had to know exactly where your target sat. The first M10 died at 0315. Panther number 421 from 2nd Company put a round through its engine compartment at 75 yards. The TD had been watching south. The German came from the east, hull down behind a hedgerow, only the turret visible. One shot, the M10's diesel fuel ignited. The crew bailed out. 3 men made it, the loader didn't. 2 minutes later, a second M10 was hit. Same company, different Panther. The German tanks were bypassing some American positions, destroying others, creating chaos. Radio discipline collapsed. Platoon leaders tried to coordinate, but the fog of war was literal fog. Ground mist mixed with smoke from burning vehicles made visibility worse than the darkness. Staff Sergeant Robert Braun commanded M10, number C7. His vehicle sat in a shallow depression 200 yards west of Le Dézert's church, hull down, behind what remained of a stone wall. He'd positioned there at 1800 hours the previous evening. Good sight lines, south and southwest, cover from direct fire. The infantry had dug fighting holes nearby. If German infantry tried to approach, the 39th Regiment's riflemen would stop them. At 0330, Braun heard the diesel engines, deep, growling, distinctive. German tanks used gasoline engines that made a different sound, but half-tracks used diesels. Panzer Grenadiers were coming. He called his gunner. "Traverse left. Infantry approaching from 270. The gunner, Corporal Thomas Chen, began hand-cranking the turret. Slowly. The manual traverse was agonizingly slow, but the electric traverse motor was too loud. It would give away their position. Then Braun saw it. A Panther, 300 yards south, moving along the hedge line. The German tank hadn't seen them yet. "Traverse right," Braun corrected. "Target our tank, 3 o'clock, 300 yards. Chen reversed direction. The turret swung back 15 seconds, 20, 30. The Panther disappeared behind another hedgerow. "Hold," Braun ordered. They waited. 40 seconds. 60. The Panther reappeared, now 250 yards away, angling northwest toward the village. Its flank was exposed. "Ready," Chen reported. "Fire!" The 3-inch gun roared. The recoil rocked the M10 backward, despite its 30-ton weight. Braun watched the tracer. The armor-piercing shell struck the Panther's right side, just below the turret ring. The German tank shuddered. Smoke poured from the engine deck. Flames followed seconds later. "Hit!" Braun called. "Reload! AP!" The loader, Private First Class Michael Torres, slammed another armor-piercing round into the breech. Up! But more Panthers were coming. Braun counted them through his field glasses as dawn began breaking. 6, 7, 8 Panthers, advancing in a loose formation through the bocage toward Le Dézert. Behind them, half-tracks carrying infantry. The Germans had committed serious strength to this attack. The 2nd Panther spotted C7's muzzle flash. German tank commanders were trained to watch for exactly that. The brief flare of light, when an American gun fired. The Panther's commander identified the threat and gave his gunner a target. The German fired first. The 75mm shell missed C7 by 10 feet. It struck the ground between the M10 and the stone wall, detonating on impact. Fragments peppered the TD's thin side armor. More fragments screamed past the open turret. One piece of shrapnel caught Torres in the shoulder. He went down. "Gunner, target that Panther!" Braun screamed. Chen had already identified it. He laid the gun, compensating for range and the target's movement. "On! Fire!" The second shot from C7 struck the Panther's glacis plate at a shallow angle. The armor-piercing round ricocheted harmlessly into the sky. The Panther kept coming. Its gunner fired again. This time, the German didn't miss. The 75mm shell struck C7's front slope armor dead center. The thin armor shattered. The shell penetrated through to the driver's compartment. Private First Class James Keller, sitting in the driver's seat, took the full force of the blast. His left leg was nearly severed below the knee. The assistant driver, sitting to his right, died instantly. Head trauma from spalling fragments that peeled off the inside of the armor when the shell penetrated. The transmission was destroyed. Oil and hydraulic fluid sprayed everywhere. The M10 couldn't move. Braun heard Keller screaming. He dropped through the turret into the crew compartment, found the driver still conscious. Leg barely attached, blood everywhere. "Medic!" Braun shouted to the infantry nearby. "We need a medic!" But the infantry had their own casualties. German machine gun fire swept the American positions. Mortar rounds were falling. The medics were busy. Braun pulled the tourniquet from his first aid pouch and cinched it above Keller's knee. He gave him morphine. 2 syrettes, the maximum safe dose. Keller's screaming subsided to moans. Torres climbed back up to the turret, blood soaking his left shoulder. "I can still load," he said. Chen never left his position. Another Panther. 2 o'clock. 400 yards. Braun looked. The German tank was moving slowly through a gap in the hedgerow. Turret traversing, searching for targets. It hadn't spotted C7 yet. Braun climbed back into the commander's position. Wait until he's clear of the hedgerow. Side shot. The Panther emerged fully into the open field. Its commander stood in the cupola, scanning with binoculars, looking the wrong direction. Fire! The third shot from C7 caught the Panther in the side armor just behind the driver's position. The shell punched through 45 millimeters of vertical plate, like it wasn't there. Inside the German tank, the armor-piercing round tore through stored ammunition. The Panther exploded. The turret lifted 6 inches, then settled back down. Flames erupted from every hatch. 2 Panthers dead, but C7 was immobilized. Torres was wounded. Keller was bleeding out, despite the tourniquet. And at least 6 more German tanks were still advancing toward Le Dézert. Braun grabbed the radio handset. Charlie 6, this is Charlie 7. We're disabled, but still in action. Enemy armor approaching from the south, multiple. Panthers, request fire support. The battalion commander's voice came back, distorted by static. Charlie 7, all units engaged. Artillery is inbound. Hold your position. Hold position, as if they had a choice. The Panthers kept coming. At 0400 hours, the American artillery began falling. 105mm howitzers from the 9th Infantry Division's Artillery Battalion fired a pre-registered defensive concentration south of Le Dézert. The shells impacted among the advancing German armor and infantry. Explosions walked across the bocage countryside. Dirt, smoke, and shrapnel filled the air. The barrage slowed the German advance, but didn't stop it. The Panthers continued pushing forward, using the hedgerows for cover, advancing from one concealed position to another. The Panzer Grenadiers dismounted from their half-tracks and moved on foot through the fields, staying low, using the terrain. Staff Sergeant Braun watched through his field glasses. He could see German infantry filtering through the bocage 300 yards south. Behind them, at least 4 Panthers were still operational and moving toward the village. The artillery had destroyed 1, maybe 2. The others kept coming. Chen, traverse left, infantry in the open, 270 degrees. The gunner cranked the turret. The 50 caliber machine gun pointed toward the advancing German soldiers. Braun grabbed the spade grips and pressed the butterfly trigger. The Browning roared. Tracers arced across the morning twilight. German soldiers went down or dove for cover behind hedgerows, but machine gun fire wouldn't stop tanks. Another M10 from Company C died at 0415. Panther number 433 put a round through its turret at 400 yards. The American crew bailed out under German machine gun fire. 2 made it to friendly lines. 3 didn't. The battalion executive officer, Major William Hendricks, arrived at 0430 in a jeep that had no business being anywhere near the front line. He found Braun's position, dismounted under mortar fire, and ran to C7. Sergeant, can you move this vehicle? Braun shook his head. Transmission's gone, sir. Driver's badly wounded. We're fighting from here, or we're abandoning. Hendricks looked at the crippled M10, then at the advancing German armor. How many rounds do you have? 46. We've fired 2. Then you're staying. Hendricks pointed south. I count 5 Panthers still moving, maybe 6. They break through here, they retake the village. If they retake the village, the whole division flank is exposed. He met Braun's eyes. You understand what I'm telling you? Braun understood. They were the last functioning anti-tank gun covering this sector. If they withdrew, nothing stood between the Panthers and Le Dézert except infantry with bazookas. Bazookas were effective at 50 yards if you were brave enough and lucky enough to get that close. At 300 yards, they were useless. We'll hold, sir. Hendricks nodded and ran back to his jeep. Braun never saw him again. The major was killed 20 minutes later when a mortar round hit his vehicle on the road back to battalion headquarters. At 0500 hours, 3 Panthers attempted a coordinated assault on the American positions west of Le Dézert. They advanced in a wedge formation, using covering fire and movement. One tank would fire while the others moved. Then they'd switch. Professional tactics. Veteran crews. C7 engaged the lead Panther at 350 yards. Chen's first shot missed high. The German tank returned fire immediately. The 75mm shell struck the ground 15 feet in front of C7's position, showering the vehicle with dirt and stones. Reload. Same target. Torres, functioning with one good arm, wrestled another armor-piercing round into the breach. Blood from his shoulder wound dripped onto the shell casing. Up! Fire! The second shot struck the Panther's left track. The track shattered. The German tank slewed sideways, immobilized. But the gun still worked. The Panther's turret traversed towards C7. Third round! Finish him. Chen laid the gun on the disabled Panther's side armor. At 350 yards, the 3-inch gun could penetrate. On! Fire! The armor-piercing shell punched through the Panther's side into the fighting compartment. The German tank didn't explode. It just stopped. Smoke began pouring from the hatches. The crew bailed out seconds later, running for cover in the hedgerows. 3 Panthers dead, but 2 more were still advancing. The sun was rising now. Visibility improved. Braun could see the German tanks clearly. Both were moving along the southern edge of the same hedgerow, 200 yards apart, approaching from the southeast. They'd be in killing range within minutes. The American infantry positions around Le Dézert were taking casualties. German mortar fire and machine gun fire from the advancing Panzer Grenadiers was pinning down the 39th Regiment's riflemen. Some positions were being overrun. Braun could hear small arms fire getting closer, individual rifle shots. The distinctive burp of German MP-40 submachine guns, the slower hammering of American M1 Garans. If the Panthers reached the village, the German infantry would follow. The American line would collapse. At 0520, the 4th Panther died. Another M10 from Company C, positioned 500 yards north of Braun's location, caught the German tank in a perfect flank shot. The Panther exploded spectacularly. Ammunition cooked off for 30 seconds. The turret was blown completely off the hull. 1 Panther remained operational in Braun's sector. It was number 427, commanded by Oberfeldwebel Klaus Richter. Richter was 26 years old. He'd been fighting since Poland in 1939. He'd survived the invasion of France, 3 years on the Eastern Front, and 2 months in Normandy. He was careful, methodical, and very good at his job. Richter had watched 4 of his company's Panthers die in the past hour. He knew the Americans had at least 1 active tank destroyer in this sector. Probably more. He couldn't see them through the bocage, but he knew they were there. Somewhere. He ordered his driver to halt behind a hedgerow and study the terrain through his commander's cupola periscope. He scanned slowly, looking for any sign of American armor. A hull silhouette, a gun barrel, a muzzle flash. There. 200 yards northwest. A damaged vehicle, hull down behind a stone wall. The turret was intact. The gun was pointing south. It was an M10, and it wasn't moving. Richter gave his gunner the target. Fein Panzer. 200 Meter. Enemy armor. 2 o'clock. 200 meters. The gunner, Unteroffizier Hans Meyer, laid the gun. The KWK-42's optics were excellent. He could see the American tank destroyer clearly, could see the exposed crew in the open-topped turret, could see the commander scanning with binoculars. Ziel erkannt, Meyer reported. Target identified. Feuer! The 75mm shell left the Panther's gun at 3,600 feet per second. At 200 meters, flight time was less than 1/10 of a second. No time to react, no time to take cover. The German shell struck C7's turret on the right side. The thin armor cracked. The shell penetrated into the turret basket. It struck the stored ammunition. What happened next should have killed everyone in the vehicle instantly. 9 3-inch rounds were stored in ready racks inside the turret. Each round contained 6 pounds of explosive. When the German shell hit, those rounds should have detonated. They didn't. The armor-piercing shell punched through the ammunition racks without triggering a secondary explosion. It exited through the left side of the turret and buried itself in the ground 20 feet away. But the damage was catastrophic. The turret traverse mechanism was destroyed. The ready ammunition racks were torn apart. Metal fragments from the shattered racks wounded Torres again, this time in the leg. Chen took shrapnel to his back and right arm. The 3-inch gun was undamaged. They could still fire, but they couldn't traverse the turret. Whatever direction the gun pointed now was the only direction they'd be able to shoot, and the gun was pointing 45 degrees away from the Panther. Braun dropped into the crew compartment. Keller was still alive, barely conscious, morphine keeping him quiet. Torres was bleeding from 2 wounds now. Chen was trying to assess the damage to his back. Couldn't reach the wounds. Didn't know how bad they were. "Can you load?" Braun asked Torres. The loader looked at him. Blood soaked his uniform. His left shoulder was useless. His right leg was torn open. "Yes, Sergeant." "Can you shoot?" Braun asked Chen. The gunner's back was bleeding. His right arm was weak, but his left arm still worked. "Yes, Sergeant." Braun climbed back to the commander's position. He looked at the Panther. 200 yards. The German tank had backed behind the hedgerow after firing. Richter was too experienced to stay exposed. He'd fired and displaced. Standard German tank doctrine. But Braun had watched where the Panther went. And he understood the blockage. There were only so many routes through the hedgerows, only so many gaps wide enough for a 45-ton tank. If the Panther advanced from that position, it would have to come through one specific gap. And that gap was directly in C7's fixed field of fire. "Chen, you see that opening in the hedgerow?" 11 o'clock. 180 yards. The gunner looked. He saw it, a 10-foot gap where farmers had cut through the ancient earthwork decades ago. "I see it. Lay the gun on that gap. If that Panther advances, he's coming through there." Chen adjusted elevation and made minor corrections to account for the range. The gun was now aimed at empty space. "On target." They waited. 60 seconds, 90. 2 minutes. Then Braun heard it, the Maybach engine revving, the distinctive squeal of steel tracks on steel wheels. The Panther was moving. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The Panther's bow appeared in the gap. Then the hull. Then the turret. The German tank was moving slowly, cautiously, turret traversing as it advanced through the opening. "Fire when ready," Braun said quietly. Chen waited. 3 seconds. 4. The Panther was fully exposed now, side armor facing C7. 200 yards. Textbook shot. Firing. The 3-inch gun roared for the 6th time that morning. The armor-piercing shell crossed 200 yards in a fraction of a second and struck the Panther exactly where Chen aimed, right side, between the drive sprocket and the first road wheel. The shell penetrated through 45 millimeters of vertical armor into the engine compartment. The Maybach engine absorbed the shell's kinetic energy and disintegrated. Fuel lines ruptured, hot metal fragments ignited fuel vapor. The Panther's engine burst into flames. Richter ordered his crew out immediately. The engine fire would spread to the crew compartment within seconds, then to the ammunition storage. When that happened, the tank would explode. All 5 German crewmen evacuated successfully. They ran for cover in the hedgerows. 2 were hit by small arms fire from American infantry positions. 1 died. 1 was captured. Richter and the other 2 survivors made it back to German lines. C7 had killed its 4th Panther. The German counteroffensive at Le Dézert continued for another 6 hours. The Panzer Lehr Division committed every available tank and all remaining Panzer Grenadiers to the assault. They wanted that village. They needed that road junction. They didn't take it. By 1400 hours on July 11th, the German attack had failed. The Americans held Le Dézert. The 899th Tank Destroyer Battalion's Company C had destroyed 12 Panthers, 1 Panzer IV, and 1 Stu-G assault gun. They'd lost 3 M10s, destroyed, and 5 damaged. Casualties were 21 wounded, 7 killed. Staff Sergeant Robert Braun was awarded the Silver Star. Corporal Thomas Chen received the Bronze Star. Private First Class Michael Torres received the Bronze Star. Private First Class James Keller survived. His leg was amputated at a field hospital that afternoon. He spent 14 months in military hospitals before being discharged in September 1945. The 899th Tank Destroyer Battalion fought through France, Belgium, and into Germany. They participated in the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. They crossed the Rhine in March 1945. They were in southern Germany when the war ended on May 8th. The title asks whether a crippled tank destroyer ambushed 11 Panthers in 90 minutes with a crew that had one good leg. The reality was more complex and, perhaps, more remarkable. At Le Dézert, multiple tank destroyer crews fought for 6 hours against overwhelming German armor. Some vehicles were crippled, some crews were wounded. They held their ground not because of any single heroic action, but because they understood that withdrawal meant defeat. They stayed because the infantry depended on them. They fought because that's what tank destroyer crews did. The M10 was never the best tank destroyer in World War II. Its armor was too thin. Its gun was barely adequate against Panthers. The manual turret traverse was agonizingly slow, but it was reliable, mechanically simple, and available in numbers. And when crewed by men like Braun, Chen, Torres, and Keller, it did its job. The German Panther was technically superior to every American tank and tank destroyer fielded in Normandy. Better gun, better armor, better optics. But technical superiority doesn't win battles. Crew training wins battles. Tactical positioning wins battles. Determination wins battles. At Le Dézert, American determination defeated German technical excellence. The 899th Tank Destroyer Battalion was deactivated in November 1945. Most of the men went home. Some stayed in the army. None forgot Le Dézert. The village still stands today. If you visit, you can walk the roads where the battle was fought. The hedgerows remain. The fields are still divided into small compartments. Stand in that landscape, and you understand why tank warfare in Normandy was measured in yards, not miles. Why ambush mattered more than armor thickness. Why courage and skill could overcome technical disadvantage. The story of the crippled tank destroyer isn't about superhuman heroics. It's about ordinary men doing an extraordinarily difficult job under impossible conditions. They weren't trying to be heroes. They were trying to survive. They were trying to keep their friends alive. They were trying to stop German tanks from killing American infantry. They succeeded. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.